Should I start immediately?
No, I will introduce everybody.
Okay.
You're good. You're good. So welcome everybody. Oh yeah, Maha, if you wanted to share when we get to yours, we'll absolutely let you share your screen. We'll just switch over. We have no less than 6 screens in front of me, no, 8 screens in front of me right now. I don't know why we need all of this technical power, but perhaps it's for our amazing speakers that we have that are coming up next. We have to give them all of the awesome technological advancement that they need and so well deserve. But welcome to our second session of the Online International Summit at OLC Accelerate. As part of OLC Live, we're a week of free programming that is coming out of Orlando, Florida as part of this conference. And today we're talking about one of the most important things to me within access and impact within learning, and that's openness. And particularly we're looking at different contexts of openness across the globe. So we had our first session this morning at 8:30 a.m. With Katsusuke Shigeta from Hokkaido University at the Center for Open Education. Got all that out, I'm very happy. And he started us out with a really amazing provocation about thinking locally within our context and really aligning openness and our open educational practices to the mission and goals of our regions. So thinking small. We're going to talk now to 2 amazing champions of access and impact within education. First up, we'll have Dhanjay, Jhurry, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Mauritius, and he's going to talk to us about the Sustainable Development Goals. And then from there, what we're going to do is go to Maha Bali, who's an Associate Professor of Practice at the Center for Teaching and Learning at the American University in Cairo, and co-founder, co-director, steward, champion of virtually connecting, which is all about bringing people together, just like we're doing right now in that same spirit. So really excited to hear her talk about designing learning spaces that are openly equitable, openly hospitable, and intentionally so. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dhanjay, and I will guide us through each of the sessions. For those of you that this is your first session that you're attending today, I know we've had some people just stay on, which is great. I'll give 2 little announcements, one of which we are live tweeting all sorts of things. So if you would like right now, please go ahead in the chat. If you actually, put your Twitter handle in there, we'll be sure to give you shout outs for all of the amazing work that you're doing today. And the second thing I'd like to add as well, and I've just put the link into the chat, that's our collaborative worksheet that we're working on throughout the day and also past today. So the way that works is that you're going to hear the provocations. We're going to invite you to answer questions that we've put in there. Clark and I may, and I forgot, we didn't introduce ourselves. Oh my gosh.
Oh, who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
I'm Angela Gunder, and I'm one of the co-hosts of OLC Live. And
I'm Clark Shaw Nelson, and I'm also the co-host of OLC Live.
And we are your stewards today throughout this endeavor. You'll tell we're not too serious about anything except for making sure that collaboration and community happen through this. Everything else, no formality. We're just friends here. So that Google Doc that I put up into the chat, I'll put it up there one more time. You can follow along with the speakers. They've left you resources ahead of time. They've left you their contact information so that you can reach out to them. They've put their slides up here for you. We're also recording this session. We're also creating transcripts of these sessions so that you'll be able to see it written out in text form. And the reason that we're capturing all of this information multimodally is because this collaborative worksheet is going to be synthesized and turned into a white paper when we're all done. So if you scroll down to the section on the document that says Session 2 Africa, you will notice that at the bottom of the provocations and the questions, there's an area that says contributors. And we would really love for you to put your name here if you're adding to this white paper. We want to give you credit for your meaningful contributions to this effort that we're doing today to help to define openness in different global contexts. So that's it. That's my time. It's 10:05. I'm going to be good and stop talking. And I'm going to turn it over to Dhanjay now, who's going to lead us in our first provocation.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Angela, for this nice introduction. And so without any further ado, I will step into, my slides immediately. I'm going to talk about SDGs. But first of all, before talking about SDGs, I thought that it would be interesting to review a number of the challenges that universities face these days. When I say universities, I would like to point out that it's, I think, one of the first time in the history of universities since Alexander von Humboldt, if I may say so, who is considered as the father of modern universities, that both in the developed and the developing world, we're looking at similar issues. I think it didn't happen like that. We were always talking in the past of a lot of gap between the North and the South. I mean to say the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. But now, be it in Mauritius, be it on the African continent, Far East, Australia, or the North, we're all talking of disruption. We're all talking of educational technologies. We're all talking of promoting industry-business interaction. Are we not all talking of going on the track of entrepreneurial activities? Socially engaged universities. I just received one Vice Chancellor from SOAS London, and he's championing transnational education. We are very closely connected with the University of Arizona, your university, Angela, and we're talking a lot of microcampus, developing teaching together. Again, like a transnational education. So universities face a lot of institutional change. We're talking of open knowledge institutions. You referred to the main theme of this conference being about openness. So how do we do that? How do we look at universities differently? Should universities continue to exist as ivory towers? Should universities continue to say they have the knowledge and everybody should converge to them? Should we look differently? At the University of Mauritius, we are championing not why universities are what they are, but what universities can bring, how universities can impact. I guess many other universities are looking in the same direction. To do that, my vision was to say we're no longer, as a university, in the center of the marketplace. We are just a partner. In the center of the marketplace is innovation. So the question is, can we champion innovation on our own? Should we not think more than our own borders and look at how we can partner with others? So that is why I'm coming with this idea of about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN championed in 2015 as following to the MDGs. So what I'm saying is the SDGs offer goals that cross-cut all universities. Here we're talking of focusing on research activities and on research activities that can impact on the community, that can impact on the economy, that can impact on the environment, that can impact on social, cultural, so many things. And in the 17 SDGs, we got so many to do. The question is, can the SDGs unite universities to address common problems? That is the question that I'm asking. And to be able, to use the SDGs, we need, of course, to foster research and innovation partnerships. We cannot do that if we're not open, if you're not enhancing openness. We cannot do that if our focus is just on producing knowledge and not looking at how we use knowledge to impact. But then when I say that we could unite maybe around SDGs, there is a premise. We cannot do that if each university has not identified its own areas of research strength that can be then leveraged by other universities. How do we do that? We cannot move along the lines of one university championing all the SDGs. We can have one university championing one or two SDGs, and other universities joining that university to further the work, to learn, to also bring to bring whatever they can bring to that university or to the global goals. Now, one example that I can give you is in July next year, I proposed to the University of Arizona to organize a global microcampus conference on the SDGs. And the idea is to choose a number of those SDGs, 4 or 5 of them, and to have intensive discussion on those SDGs and to see how we can unite the universities around them. This is one concrete proposal, and I'm very happy that UA has agreed to move forward with that. We're now finalizing and will be reaching out to other microcampuses of the UA network. So this is one concrete example that I've chosen. How to get universities to address common goals? Well, we propose a structure, and the structure, we think it should not be a hierarchical one. It should be one, just as I've just mentioned, where universities feel that they can bring something to SDGs. So it doesn't mean that a university in the developed world should necessarily lead one SDG. It could be a university in the developing world. So we put all universities at the same level. It's not institution oriented. It's not institution led, but it's more issue based. In other words, we look at the goals and we respond to the goals. So with that, it's obvious that we need specific opportunities. We need to find to fine-tune the ecosystem to make this happen. There are a number of issues also that we have to look into. How we do tech transfer, it's not trivial. Each country has got its own laws and so on. How we look at doing more than just dealing with the research, how we look at the export control. So these are things that I think should also be very important in moving forward this idea of structuring around the SDGs. And finally, I think that the idea is more precisely to bring together a diversity of perspectives and experiences from various universities. And I believe this is critical to increase the value of knowledge. And when I say that, it will never happen if the universities are not open and they're not practicing transparency and trust. I believe these are key elements for this to happen. So this is what I would like to set, and I will welcome discussions around that.
This is fantastic. I know that people have questions probably, and I want them to save them for just a moment, because I want to effortlessly transition from your call for a framework for us to build a culture of openness to Maha talking to us about how we can actually do that important culture work, which takes time and patience and effort. And she's an amazing steward in this and is going to guide us in that. I believe we're going to stop sharing and we're going to let Maha take over.
Hey.
You have control.
Thank you. Can you must Did I forget to unmute myself? You can hear me, right?
We can hear you and we can see your screen share.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. So thank you, Dhanjay. And I'm going to go from the macro level that you were talking at and talk at the micro level while trying to also be aware of the macro level. So I'm going to talk about designing particular learning spaces with intentionally equitable hospitality. My slides are available for commenting at bit.ly/OLC Bali, all caps, and it's there. It's in the document, so you can find it again later. First thing I wanted you guys to do is just take a very quick look at this. I know I only have 5 minutes, but I just want people to tell me what they see when they look at this. What can you read here? You can write it in the chat. Yes, swirly colors. But what do you read? Right. So you're reading opportunity is now here or opportunity is nowhere. And in a normal day, I don't know why you think it's there, but I'm going to tell you why I put it there. Is that the same learning space or the same learning intervention can appear differently to different people. Context matters. For some people, they will only see the nowhere. This is no use, let's not do it. For other people, it's going to be a now here. This is excellent, let's pursue it. And a lot of the text about, not the text, the discourses about openness and about educational technology are quite either utopian or dystopian. And we sort of need to be able to see both at the same time and to be able to recognize it's not just exist at the same time, it's that they will be like that for different people. It's not that it's going to be always a positive experience for everyone or a negative experience for everyone. It's important to realize for whom is it positive, for whom is it negative. And when we look at something like an open educational practice and we try to see if it's positive or negative, we need to look at what kind of open educational practice it is. Is it something that is centered around content or process? Is it something centered around the teacher or the learner? Is it centered around a pedagogical purpose or a social justice purpose? In order to be able to evaluate whether it is an opportunity, is it worthwhile for whom? And I think that the main center of my provocation actually is from an article I read earlier this week, which is this: equity isn't for all, equity is for those farthest from justice. So when we're trying to talk about equity in open or in any other educational space, then we need to focus on those farthest from justice. What they need, they decide for themselves what they need, and then we create the space for that to happen. Rather than thinking about making it equitable to everyone or accessible to everyone, we need to sort of shift that conversation and focus on those farthest from justice who wouldn't be able to reach them. And this is an image that maybe some of you have seen before. I want to focus on something in particular about it. This one focuses on making sure that everyone has the same resources to be able to access the apple, even though they have different starting points. I am suggesting that not everyone wants the apple, and therefore we have to question whether we who are not the farthest from justice know what those farthest from justice need, what kind of help they need, what kind of support they need, what will empower them. So for me, what I'm trying to argue here is, how do you design the learning spaces with access? Because access assumes that we already know what's valuable, and we just need to grant access to those who can't reach it. That's what that image was showing. That's what that image, how that image represents equity. We don't necessarily redesign the learning spaces to be more welcoming to diverse others. So we introduce them, we include them in our learning space, but we don't necessarily change the learning space when they become part of it, right? And we don't necessarily involve the diverse people in the design or redesign of those spaces. So just because we've made it accessible doesn't mean that it's welcoming. That table on the right, it's actually very difficult for someone to then come into that table and feel comfortable if they weren't part of designing it, if they're not used to sitting that way. And then if you look at the one where people are sitting and eating on the floor, you can tell that it's a cultural thing, like who would feel comfortable in one or the other. To get both types of people to sit together on a table, who would be involved in designing it? Who decides how it's going to be designed? Who's going to go? Who's going to decide the process of what gets included? What gets excluded from it? Are there things that if you include them, they will exclude other people? And how do you prioritize what you do given limited space? And I'm arguing, focus on those farthest from justice and think about how to make it accessible to them. And so the notion of equality that we at Virtually Connecting have been working on for a while is thinking about virtually connecting as a way to connect to conferences that isn't about giving access to existing opportunities, but redesigning learning spaces with the needs of those farthest from justice. And the fact that Virtually Connecting is designed by those farthest from justice. people like myself who lives in the global south and cannot travel very much because I have a young child, people like Rebecca Hogue, who was at the time when we started this, a graduate student not affiliated with an institution. So whether the people who go to conferences are the ones who don't, quite a lot of the people in our community are not people who have a lot of mobility to go to conferences for whatever reason, or they are not among the most privileged. And therefore, and having people like Sadiq over here and people like Persa Mehran who sometimes have visa issues and cannot attend conferences, they will decide what they feel they're missing and design the experiences they're going to have, who they want to talk to and things like that. So sometimes it's sacrificing things that the more privileged participants find more comfortable. You know, that's what and these are pictures of virtually connecting. And one of the things, for example, is sometimes who gets to decide who's going to be in a virtually connecting session is a lot of times the virtual folks can't there, and who do they want to see? Which conferences do they wish they were at? And so here's the provocation. It's how do you design learning spaces that are intentionally equitable for those? How can we do that? So going beyond the virtually of potential equitable hospitality and applying it to other learning spaces. And I'm done.
Thank you. With the mic drop at the end. I was trying to type in that question. I think that that's a good place for us to start, of how do we design learning spaces that are intentionally equitable. But as I do this, as I attempt to multitask, which we know is not possible, I would like to engage the audience in two things. So one, oh, your sound, it was in and out, but I think that we were okay, and that recording is going to be clear. Zoom does wonders about, you know, synthesizing all of the data that it collects to make a clear product at the end. So we will have the transcript and the recordings available to everybody afterwards. So I'm going to invite everyone to do two things. One, on that collaborative Google Doc, I would like for folks to start to answer the questions, including the one that that Maha put in there for us. And then also the provocation that Dhanjay gave us as well, about how do we start to collaborate with intentionality, transparency, and trust at the macro level. So start to write in the Google Doc. You can answer any questions in any order, obviously. The bottom question is of utmost importance to us, of how do you personally define openness? So within that question, we're going to be doing a lot of the synthesis work in order to put together the white paper. So if you don't write anything else but that, I think that that would be great for you to leave that information for us. We want to hear your voice, your unique perspective. But in addition to that, you're more than welcome to use the microphone, or if you want to write questions in the chat for both of our speakers, I'd be happy to relay them, and we can engage in a bit of conversation around the topics that were shared. And while people are typing, I can kick us off a little bit. And maybe both Dhanjay and Maha, you can talk about it. Dhanjay, for many on the call, as the chat was going on, folks were not familiar with the UN Sustainability Development Goals at all. And Maha proffered that, you know, it's part of rich conversations in the Southern Hemisphere and in the South, and it's a rather new concept to those that are in the Northern Hemisphere. Could each of you talk a little bit about perhaps what you're hearing, what you're seeing, or what's happening at your institutions around the SDGs that you think might be promising for us to know about as part of this conversation? Oh, Dhanjay, I think you're muted. I think I can unmute you. Oh, no, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So can you hear me better?
Perfect.
Okay, so what I started saying that true. We tend to hear that quite often, that SDGs are more of the southern hemisphere's business than the northern hemisphere. I'm not sure whether this is true, because in 2018, the Times Higher Education came up with that SDG ranking of universities. You know, when we see the universities that are top the list in the SDG ranking, we see mainly universities from the north. So saying that this is more of a jargon of the South, I don't think is really true. But I think the SDGs for me is a way, it addresses real problems of society. And, you know, it follows the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. So the 2030 UN Agenda for Sustainable Development has set 17 goals. And the 17 goals, starting with poverty, going to public health, through innovation, energy, life under the sea, partnership is SDG 17. So all these are issues we're talking every day in universities. But it's a way to bring universities together and say, hey, is it better that you work alone, or is it better that you unite together and you know, work along the lines of sustainable development and come up with real impacts? The SDGs are meant to impact. Are we not all universities around the world looking in the same direction of impacts? Probably we do it on our own, but if we look at the way you know, we should work, it is very hard for any university to be able to come up and say, we are championing all the 17 SDGs. And yet they're all very important. So I believe that you know, this encourages partnership, and this is a way to also bridge the gap between the North and the South.
You said something very provocative there too, where you said you used the language of the business of the South, or only the business of the South. And it reminds me of a lot of the equity and inclusion work that I've been lucky enough to be a part of, where particularly looking at leadership within online learning and looking at the groups that are often not included. And quite often those conversations are framed by the groups that, I'll use the language that Maha used, of that are the furthest from justice. When in actuality, it has to be a collective effort, a group effort. It's not for one group to save themselves of the wrongs that have been done to them, but in actuality, us coming together and us having, you know, a common language, a common framework, and doing that important cultural work that is quite challenging to do, and a lot of people shy away from. And you know, they'll choose to go the easy route as opposed to thinking about impact, knowing that they're going to have courageous conversations and huge difficulties in order to get to that place that we want to get to.
Can I mention something slightly related to what Dhanjay was talking about? So I'm part of the expert panel for the Horizon report that's coming out of EDUCAUSE, that used to come out of NMC. And one of the things I'm noticing as part of that group is I'm the only person from the Middle East and Africa. And whenever we talk about something like, let's talk about internationalization or branch campuses or whatever, okay? It's happening here and it's happening there, but what it means for me here is completely different than what it means for them there. What it means for them there is international students coming from where I'm at. What it means to me is international campuses coming to open branches here. And it means students from here going to study there, but it's the same topic. But what we're worried about, or what we're interested in, is completely different than what they're interested in. I was recently at a conference about online virtual exchange for intercultural exchange. And I was using that slide with the apples again, because, you know, people in the West and in Europe are doing virtual exchange with the Middle East and Arab world because they're trying to prevent like terrorism. And I don't know, like this colonial perspective of, you know, I don't know what they're doing. They're taming the barbarians or something. And then from our side, a lot of us, because of the way they look at us, we're here to sort of show you that we are not. It's not that we think you are going to help us not become terrorists. We're trying to tell you, actually, we're not terrorists. So the kind of, it seems to be the same topic, but it's a completely different perspective on it. And so trying to work together needs a lot of people who are bridges, who sort of understand those two extreme views, but understand it on a level where you empathize and you listen and you try to understand the other. But so that's kind of how I feel about what Dhanjay was saying, that yeah, we're all talking about the same things, but I think we mean different things, or we care about different dimensions of them.
Yeah. Our framings are important, our contexts are important, our histories are incredibly important. And that bridge work that you're talking about, it takes time and intentionality. It's just as you said in your provocation, a lot of times I think we enter in trying to do good, and in fact we create dichotomies that are more harmful than what we're trying to address. But we need to start from a place of openness and communication to understand those contexts. Dhanjay, I saw you nodding as Maha was talking. I think that some of the work that you mentioned with the University of Arizona around micro campuses resonates with this too, just this notion of having a partnership between two universities, and what does that feel like for the two universities in terms of their goals. So I would love for you to speak to that a little bit.
Concerning that, particularly that partnership with UA, I mean, we're both looking, we're interested into this internationalization. I'm kind of promoting that concept of international education diplomacy. We're a small country, and a small country lost in the Indian Ocean, far from the big centers of knowledge. So, but we have the same preoccupations. So how do we move forward? Internationalization, just as our country has done, has developed its diplomacy. In the same manner, we're also engaging into that education diplomacy. So we need that. Why? Because we do not necessarily have all the competencies in-house to be able to offer all the different programs that we should be able to offer. We're talking these days of blockchain. We're talking of fintech. The West is talking of the same thing. In the US, you're talking of the same thing. In Japan, they're talking of the same thing. But we do not necessarily have all the expertise available locally. So it's important for us to partner with others. We're looking towards a research engaged university. When we talk about research engaged university, we do not necessarily have all the expertise in house to supervise students. So we'd like also to have, to be able to have sort of establish links with other countries, with other universities, where we can work together, have more people to also supervise. We do not have all the kind of equipment that we need to be able to engage in top-level research. So partnering for us, it means all this. We are not looking at partnership only in the sense that we benefit from others, because we truly believe that partnership can only happen if we have something to share with others. So we're in the spirit of also sharing. Our country has got a diversity, of people. We have people from all over the world, from the Asian continent, from Europe, from the African continent, all based in Mauritius, a highly cosmopolitan society. So what we're saying is people can also find a lot of interest in doing research in Mauritius, for example, in the field of health. We have a natural laboratory here in these islands. It's a natural lab because of the diversity of the people. So recently, an NGO started working with us. That NGO has worked for the past 2 years into developing a complex model to address poverty, and it has got, after 2 years, real good results. And after 2 years, that NGO approached us at the university to kind of formalize, to validate that model that they have put in place. Our guys have been working for a year with them, and they are so happy of the results that they have obtained. So can we share that with other countries? We're in that spirit of sharing, and that is openness. Real sharing, and not just this is ours. We need to be number one in the 100 best universities in the world. I say to people, I mean, what does that mean, right? Is that why we exist? Is that why we have universities? I'm going to meet on the 4th of December, John Gill, the director of THE, and I'm going to say to him, SDGs are meant for impact. But impact are not just metrics. We're not just using metrics to, measure impact. Impact is more than that. And let's take everybody on board. Let us not just say SDGs are the concern of the universities that are very well developed and are branding and using that as a means for branding. Right, and in a way, I fully agree with what Maha has said. At times, universities would like to partner, but without the same ideals or goals. So, but it requires a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, to bring these things together. But I can say around the SDGs, UA and us are looking the same direction. We are also looking in the same direction of how we can bring impacts.
This is excellent. We have 2 questions that came in the chat that I don't want to lose. And thank you for staying on the line, everybody, and for your rich contributions to both the Google Doc and the chat. So the question from Lisa, which we've touched upon empathy a little bit, but universal design for learning, or UDL, is often utilized by people who don't need it themselves. How can folks empathize better with equity issues when they've never experienced it themselves? I think that was directed towards you, Maha, in particular.
Maha,
yeah. So in my actual courses, I do a lot of work on empathy, and I've also seen folks who work on accessibility create workshops with the experience to help you get the experience of feeling how someone else feels to go through something. But I think for me, empathy is really, really important as a disposition and attitude to have. But if you focus on the participation, on the parity of participation of the person who is farthest from justice, they can advocate for themselves if they're not a token. So if you think about, again, I will just go back to this, it's not a kind of issue, but just telling you, like, if I'm in a group of people of 100 expert panelists, and I'm one Egyptian and they are like 50 Americans, 10 Canadians, I don't know how many people do you realize how little of a voice I have when we vote? I'm one voice in 100. I'm very vocal. You all know me. I talk a lot, so I make a difference, but it's still one vote in the end, right? So the same would be with, if you're designing a space, like when you're doing UDL, if you're giving students, let's talk about doing UDL in your own courses, right? When you include all the students in decision-making of all the options for how they can represent their assignments, how do they want to express themselves? You can give them some options if they've never heard of them, but you can also ask them to come up with their own options and give them time to think about it in a way where the dominant voices, a lot of people will just revert to tradition and not come up with something else. But you need to create the room for it, and you'll know that you've created room when students tell you something you haven't heard before. If they keep telling you things you've heard before, then you haven't gone deep enough, or they're not diverse enough, which is not your fault if the students are not diverse enough. But when they're diverse, they will come up with things that you hadn't thought about. If you give them the space to do that. So UDL is great in the sense of just reminding us of all these things that we can do differently and all the different levels of doing it differently. But thinking about it on our own is probably not going to help. Trying to empathize is great. You might come up with a few ideas, but having the actual people involved think about it themselves will help. So if you have faculty, like we have a faculty member who has a visual disability, and she helps a lot with that kind of thing, for example. But obviously she's just the one, so she's still a token in that sense. I hope that helps.
That was excellent, and it actually leads into the next question that I would love for Dhanjay to address from Steve. What does it mean in practical terms for universities as entities to be trusting and transparent? How do they do that, and what does that look like in action?
Well, what I mean to say by trust and transparency is that if we're going to work together, I think this is, down to earth. We need to trust each other, because we're going to work, if we're going to work in a network, how can we work in a network if we're not, sharing the same goals? If we're not, first of all, in that spirit of sharing, right? If we're there just to benefit from what others are bringing to us, and I don't think it's going to work. So we need to bring, when I say trust and transparency, is all the members of a network united under one SDG, for example, have got to be able. That's why I say the premise is you need to really say whether you've got your strength there or not. So if you have defined your strength and everything, then you know that you're working with a partner that with whom you will share, and will also share with you. And when I talked about transparency, is that it's important to be able to do something with another partner with whom you can freely share things. When we talk of tech transfer, some universities will say, well, we're happy to come to your place and get everything, but our laws do not enable us in our country to move forward or to deal with this and that. We cannot do tech transfer, but we're happy to come to your place. It will not work. I think that in that sense, it is important that there is a code of practice that is shared by all partners, and all partners abide by the same principles. Otherwise, it will never work the way we're looking at it. Obviously, we're not living in an ideal world, right? So, we'll never reach that, a theoretical degree of transparency and trust. But the 80-20 principle rule should be there, right? If I may say so.
This is all just really so thought-provoking. It's amazing. And I really love the idea of meshing openness with the sustainable development goals in the same way that I mentioned in the chat, the grand challenges in social work. The idea of having these similar goals, as you were saying, that people are working towards, so that when you mesh that together, that gives everyone sort of a way forward. And as we know from the things that are going on ecologically around the planet, I mean, sustainability is got to be something that is essential to everything that we do going forward. But I'm curious from both of your perspectives, and I'm kind of asking this of all around the world today, whether locally at either the local level, the state level, the federal level, if you have any movement in sort of the federal, the governmental levels, the legal levels, the policy levels, or even at a university, in terms of if you're receiving money from federal grants, or if you're, a public institution, if there's anything saying, well, you need to publish openly, or you need to use OER and so on, if you're getting any sense that that needle is changing on the legal spectrum.
So Maha added "not in Egypt" in the chat.
I would say the same thing here. But this said, there is nobody imposes upon us not to go open, not to go open source. For the time being, it's a choice. People are not seeing, the benefits really of going, to the open source. If I may bring something more down to earth, if we look at SDG 4, which is about quality education, right? What you're doing here, Angela, is exactly the way it should work. Should we not be able to share around the world the best practices? For, let's say, if we take just quality education as which is goal number 4, right? The same thing that we're doing here. Why can't it be done for other SDGs as well? And does it not make sense this forum to be a regular forum where we can brainstorm, where we can share really focused, share expertise, get to, this year we have moved from the old American credit system of 45 hours for free credits to the European credit transfer system. We call it here the learner-centered credit system. And should we not share our best practices? How we're moving forward with that? Would like to learn from you, and I talked to you about that, Angela, and I would love, and I see Maha is also a lot versed with the LCCS, learner centered. So I mean, these are things that where we are adding value, isn't it? And so it's not. I would like to move from something which is theoretical to just very practical. And something that we can, everybody understand the same language.
We have time for just one more, a little bit of a chat, and Maha fielded 2 questions in the chat that I would love for her to synthesize for us with a beautiful answer to close us out. And then
Dhanjay doesn't know me, so he thinks I'm talking on a theoretical level. But people who know me know that I do this in practice. So,
no, don't get me. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely not.
Okay.
I'm not. No. I don't feel like that at all.
Respond to these questions because they're quite practical questions, right? So Kathy's asking, how do we work with those farthest from justice in ways, that could be problematic? Like, how do you reach them because there's a power dynamic in the first place? And then Jonathan was also asking about, if you have limited resources, how do you keep designing for those farthest from justice? So the first thing for Kathy's question is that one of the things is that the relationships are not transactional. So if you have sort of sustained relationships with diverse others, and you build the time to build those relationships, and then the opportunities will come in a more natural way, and you actually know these groups of people. So it's, first of all, not restricting yourself to knowing just one person from each culture, and then you've got that token and that's your thing. You need groups of them. So for example, with virtually connecting, I think I was the only person from my part of the world, and now that we have more people from this kind of part of the world, so someone like Sadik, who I think turned on his mic by mistake right now. So we have a couple people who have, for example, visa issues. And so we started to become more aware of how we can help with that. And Nate, after knowing Sadik for some time, I don't know how long they've known each other, probably longer than I've known both of them, I don't know, has started to work with him on different ways of helping him with that kind of thing. And it's not because he only found someone on Twitter who had visa issues and decided, oh, let me help you. It's not like that. They've known each other for a while, and then it comes up as they get to know each other. And that kind of relationship is quite different than coming in with, take this money and do whatever you want with it, which is what policymakers and funders do, right? Without really understanding the context. But when you're immersed in those contexts, and I think like maybe what Dhanjay was talking about between, the institutional partnerships, they probably have extended for quite some time. And over time, what you do with each other evolves as you start to understand each other's needs, and as the people who work in the 2 places get to know each other better. The question about those farthest from justice and limited resources, one of the things I was thinking about is, first of all, usually when you meet the needs of those farthest from justice, a lot of other people will benefit from that. And a lot of times yes, we have limited resources. If we put our resources for those farthest from justice, those close to justice will probably manage on their own without our intervention, because there's so many other ways that they can reach justice if they're close to it, right? So I'm thinking again of what I was saying earlier about people who are bridges. So people who are bridges can help with that kind of thing. So I'm thinking about myself as a bridge, because I'm not the least privileged person in Egypt. I'm less privileged in the sense of being from the global south, but I'm in the most expensive university and the most elite university in my country, and I speak English and I have good internet connection, right? So I'm already a bridge. You're not going to be able to reach the poorest Egyptians who don't speak English, who don't have internet. Maybe in 20 years' time, but not now. So there will always be the farthest from justice that you can reach. So it's not reach the farthest from justice who's like the poorest person who can't eat, because if what you're offering is not food, that's not probably the right person you should be reaching. So the farthest from justice within your context. And so in my classroom, the person in my classroom today who's farthest from justice, if I don't have a student who's blind, I don't need to worry too much about that today. But when I have a student who's blind, then that person has to be the benchmark. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
We're all nodding and agreeing and saying, yeah, we had our mics muted, but we're all in support of you. We're all in support of Dhanjay with these two incredible calls to action. I said this in the last session, but we've just covered so much ground in an incredibly short amount of time. And we have about 10 minutes left until we go into our break time, although folks are absolutely welcome to stay in the lounge and hang out with us until our next session starts. That'll be at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. We'll be talking to Frank Delengin and Maren Deepwell next about open, which will be quite exciting. Before I turn the mic over to Nate, who's going to talk a little bit about open annotation before we head out of this session. I just want to invite you to continue writing in the collaborative doc. Please leave your information on the document so that we can credit you as a co-author of this white paper that we're putting together. Please feel free to leave your Twitter handle in the chat as well. You can do that now. Google Doc or chat, either works, so that we can sing your praises for being a part of this collaborative effort. Without any further ado, he's got the sound effects board queued up. Applause for oh no, I snapped the table and our camera just shifted. I guess that means we're done. But Clark and I thank you for everybody's contributions, with special thanks to Maha and to Dhanjay.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot to both of you.
Thank you.
Hey, and before everyone goes, especially Dhanjay, I just wanted to have you take a look again at the resources that you shared in the collaborative Google Doc, and make sure that we found the appropriate links to the documents that you had in mind. I put some comments in there, Dhanjay, just to make sure that we have found the correct documents for you. And then I just wanted to orient everyone to the idea that we can continue the conversation that we started here today face to face, by using collaborative annotation on some of the documents that these great folks have shared with us, Dhanjay and Maha. And so if I just put a link into the chat here, if you're not already familiar with Hypothesis, the open source online collaborative annotation tool, you can create a free account by following that link. And then if you'll go back to that collaborative Google Doc, you'll find that we put links into the resources that Maha and Dhanjay have shared, to versions of those documents that have annotation enabled. And they're not really different versions, it's just that it's a special link that lights up annotation on top of them. And so we can use that, those links to explore those documents and perhaps continue the conversation across time and space as things move forward. And if, Dhanjay, if the links need to be corrected, just put them there in the Google Doc and we'll try to find the right thing. I did want to point out there was a really interesting document. I mean, all the documents are interesting, but there's one in particular that Maha shared that I thought was extremely provocative, and I'll just put the link to it in here. It's the one that's called "Equity Doesn't Mean All." It's the third link that she shared there. And here's the link to it with annotation
Maha, were you saying
enabled.
something? You were muted.
No, I was just smiling, I think.
That's allowed.
That's always good.
It's a very short article, so I'm glad that you like it too, Nate. It's a quick read, like people can read it in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and what I thought was maybe what caught my eye about it most was at the very end, the kind of what to do conclusion actually kind of touches back on the conversation we were just having in this idea that that the author suggests that equity isn't for all. Equity is for those farthest from justice. And if we are working toward true equity, those farthest from justice can define for themselves what they need to be whole, healthy, and in just relations to others. And I think that really resonates with what Maha was just saying. So I invite everyone to start annotating these documents collaboratively. I'm also around if anybody needs help with anything, and we can move forward. As you can see, I put links into the top of the documents in the page notes section that link back to the collaborative document. So you can move back and forth from those documents back to the Google Doc if you wish.
Thank you so much. And Maha had a suggestion too for Nate that I hope he takes us up on, because anytime we get to collaborate with Nate, my brain expands in amazing ways. So we talked about actually continuing this with an annotation party of sorts after OLC Accelerate is over, after OLC Live is all over. After Clark and I have retired our costumes that we'll be wearing from Wednesday to Friday. This is the last day you'll see me in professional gear on online, but we'll be tuning in from the year 2525 on a space station for the rest of the session. So we're gonna leave you with that. Let me just go ahead. See who can grab it first. It might be, oh, no, I think I can get it. This is the link to the entire schedule for the week, because you may have come into this with just the Online International Summit. That's just the programming for today, but we actually have programming for the entire week that is free, that is open, that is going to be generative, ideative, all of the ifs. And we hope to see you at more of these, but my thanks again. And we're going to leave the room open, but we're going to stop the recording for now. And we will see all of you, maybe some of your colleagues and friends at the next one that will start at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So from Clark and I, we're tuning out for now. Take care.
Thanks.